Totally. And we are live. I'm going to turn that off so we don't have feedback. All right, things are happening. Welcome everyone to the New York City launch of This Queer Arab Family. With the editor, Ilyas Jashan, all the way from London, and Afif Masouli, who lives here but has been in Beirut a lot lately. I'm sure we'll be hearing about that. And we're super happy to have you back and to have you here for the first time. So thank you so much. So my name is Greg Newton. I am the co-founder of the Bureau of General Services Queer Division, along with my lovely partner, Donnie Jokum. As many of you probably know, we are in the midst of a transition. Donnie and I are moving west to Portland. And thank you. But we're very happy. Jules Vernersbach, who is the founder of Hive Mind Books, will soon be the owner of the Bureau, and we will operate continuously. There will be no break in service. And thanks to the many donors to our GoFundMe campaign, this is definitely happening. So we're very happy. Normally at this point, I would be explaining that we're an all-volunteer bookstore and that we rely on both donations and sales to keep the Bureau going. But we are transitioning to a paid model, and so the fundraising is partly to enable that to happen. So I'm going to pass around this little QR code, and if you're able to donate something, we would really appreciate it, because that will help set the Bureau up for success in its new future. So I'm going to pass that around. The GoFundMe campaign, we actually reached our initial goal of $50,000 on Wednesday. Yeah. Within 2 weeks of launching it, which is great. And it's running through June 1st. So we've introduced a stretch goal of $75,000, which will really help. Jules is also going to be opening up a cafe downstairs, which will be linked to the bookstore. So lots of good stuff coming, which we'll be watching from afar with joy, because we're so happy that the Bureau is living on. Question?
Yes, for those of us that are a little less computer savvy that would just like to donate cash today, how do we do that?
Oh, you just give it to me. I always take cash.
Jules is gonna see it.
Cash and weed.
Yeah, cash and weed, baby.
Or good food. Okay, what else do I want to say? The Bureau has regular hours, Wednesdays through Sundays from 1 to 7 p.m. We often stay open later when we have events. We've been a little short on events these days just because of all that's happening. But I know the calendar for May and June is filling up. Yeah, we also have Ella, who just started this week. She's going to be managing events for both Hive Mind Books and the Bureau. So things are happening. Queer culture is alive and well in NYC.
It's not that.
No, it is not. And God knows we need it. What else do I need to say? Oh, if you're not already on our email list, you can sign up for that at the back of the room or on our website. The website is bgsqd.com, and you'll get an email every other Monday about our upcoming events. And so before I introduce Ilyas and Afif, I just want to read a land acknowledgement. So the Bureau recognizes that our organization operates on the unceded land of the Munsee Lenape. We strongly encourage you to join the Bureau in signing up to make a monthly donation to the American Indian Community House, located here in New York City, founded in 1969. Signing up to make a monthly donation to the AICH is one way for settlers and non-Native people to acknowledge the legacy of theft and genocide that comprise the history of New York City and the United States. And you can find out more at aich.org. And the Bureau recognizes Palestinian liberation as a fundamental part of our collective queer liberation. And we encourage you to take one of our free zines that are by the Register that explain why we feel it is especially important for queer people to speak out in solidarity with Palestinians. So please take one of those on your way out. I should also say, if we run out of books, because the extra books I ordered are arriving tomorrow. Thank you, Ingram, who has a monopoly on the book distribution process. So if we do run out, we do have some stickers that Ilyas can sign, and then you can slap that sticker in your book and pretend it was seamless. So let me introduce our speakers. Ilyas Jashan is a Lebanese-Palestinian journalist and writer and the editor of groundbreaking anthologies, This Arab is Queer from 2022 and This Queer Arab Family from 2025, both published by Saki Books. This Arab is Queer was a 2023 Lambda Literary Awards finalist in the USA and shortlisted for the 2023 Bread and Roses Award in the UK, and has been translated into Italian and soon in French. He has had short memoirs published in several anthologies and has been published in The Guardian, The New Arab, Gay Times, Attitude, My Kali, and more. A former editor-in-chief of Star Observer, Australia's longest-running LGBTQ+ media outlet, Ilyas was born and raised in Sydney, Australia, and now lives in London, UK. Afif Nassouli is a journalist and host of With Afif Nassouli, a weekly live stream about suppressed news and monthly interview show featuring journalists and sources. He recently spent 9 weeks in Gaza as a humanitarian aid worker with GLIA International and as a reporter with The Intercept. He is a recipient of the 2025 FIJ and Pulitzer Center Grant Awards. Afif previously worked for Spotify and the Wall Street Journal's daily news podcast, The Journal, The Daily Show with Trevor Noah, CNN, and as a legal advisor to the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Torture. His current reporting focuses on US politics, the Middle East, and queer stories around the world. Please give them both a very warm welcome.
Thank you. We obviously really appreciate you, Ilyas, for being here and also just, editing an anthology that is very meaningful to, I'm sure, everyone in this room, obviously. But before we kind of go on, we discussed that it would be really important to, do more of what was just said, which is just to acknowledge that there is a war that's going on, no matter how much they say a ceasefire is here or there. We kind of know that in times of ceasefire, there's a lot of violations and violence. And I just came back from Beirut, so it's really heavy on my mind and in my lived experience that there are queer people now in Beirut and in Gaza and in the West Bank and in Syria and all over the world that don't have the privilege to come together and think in a community and talk about stories that we get to hear and think about just together. That's just such a beautiful privilege. And I think that's the beauty of this, is that that's our duty, is to have this moment, push the conversation where it can be, so that we can kind of remember that there are people who are living, who are struggling, and also who are real humans and aren't just living and struggling. They're also living and having joy and fun. And so, I know that we discussed that. So I hope that kind of that feels sufficient to say before we get started.
Yeah, I totally agree. Can I just also add, a colleague of ours, a journalist colleague of ours, Ahmed Shahabuddin, who's currently in prison in Kuwait. He's an American citizen, so I strongly encourage for you guys to call your local representative to get US government to pressure the Kuwaiti government to release him. And he's done fantastic reporting on Palestine and also on queer communities as well. So please do increase the pressure of getting out of prison.
Yeah, journalism is not a crime. # journalism is not a crime. How many times have we said that in the last few years? And it's unbelievably ridiculous that he's in jail. But these kinds of things are very important, and they are dangerous, and they put us at risk, but we do them anyways. I guess my first question is, how did this, you started, I feel like I got to know your work on an individual basis, as in you were writing about individuals, The Arab is Queer, how did this shift into a family sort of concept for you? Like, what was the beginning of that idea?
Yeah, it was just I guess it was a several steps led to it, and they were kind of like very unrelated before they kind of coalesced into one idea. The first one is like, you know, every time with the first book, every time I did an event, the most common question I got asked by people in the audience and even online is whether I was going to do a part 2. And I was very resistant to doing that. I didn't want to do a traditional straight up sequel. And I figured if there were to be a sequel, it needed to be like with a different editor, different context. Ideally, not a cisgender male, can be someone else. But my publisher was still keen on doing a second book of some sort. So we agreed to do one of the reasons why it's like, and it's so patriarchal, so heteronormative. People are not really legible in that case for us to be able to be family or celebrate being in family, and to I didn't want people to sort of like just go with me. There's so many definitions of it: solidarity, or safe spaces, or your non-binary child, how family can be navigated without having to sacrifice who we are as Arabs. I wanted to celebrate that. I wanted to create space for that, and I wanted. And the flip side is in my cases or in mainstream, there's not much people of color when it comes to talking about queer families, and I just want this to sort of like challenge that, because queer communities around the world, especially in the West, is a very, very diverse, and I want to sort of, and I guess another reason in the lead up to when brainstorming ideas with my experience of studying deafness planned. This is very new. But in 2023, I had a cliff edge drop in my hearing, and I knew why, but it was very nothing at the time because I didn't expect it. And so all of 2023, I was basically on the waiting list to get the operation. But that year specifically, when the hearing aid, the most powerful hearing aid on the market, it still wasn't working for. I felt very socially isolated, and the fact that I live in London, my biological family's in Sydney, but that geographical isolation as well. And I felt the community that I sort of became a part of in London, the Arab community, the Queer, doing so well, and all of a sudden I had to take 5 steps back because I couldn't really age. It's still missing that community element. And so I guess that personal side and that idea of isolation and what you felt in the anthology. So yeah.
Unique lived experience. It must have been to choose just 10 writers. So that was like, because you personally what it was like, but can you sort of bring that to life, what it was like, and kind of you remember?
Yeah, open call for submissions, and I directly invited some writers. So it was half and half. So I ended up having to choose 5 writers out of 92 submissions that came through in the open call. Probably that we got 40 will be amazing, more than what we expected. Because given the niche topic, given that it was only like less than 3 months for the open call, and the chapters are quite long, like 3,000, 4,000 words. So if we got any more than 40, it'd be like amazing. So the fact that we got 92 just made my job a lot harder. But I was blown away by how many submissions we got. Because when you think about it, you have all these writers who have never met me before, but they entrusted me to read their story. And these stories are so personal, so vulnerable. So I did not take that position for granted. And so when it came to selecting, it was just really, really hard. Like I think we went through about 4 or 5 shortlists before we agreed on 5. And the reason why I chose those 5, because I had to complement the 5 that I had already directly invited. And because this is a book, it's not a magazine, it's not a journal, we want to be able to sort of structure the book in a way that has like peaks and troughs, the beginning, middle, resolution, so it actually feels like you're reading a book rather than just picking up a magazine and flicking through, finding something. So that was part of the reason, and I was also very much interested in stories based on where they're set and the themes they explored. Not so much, although representation is important, but I didn't want to be so obsessed about that and forget about everything else. Because with this book, I think about at least 4 of the writers are Lebanese, but only one of them is actually set in Lebanon. The others are set all everywhere else. One's set in Mecca during Hajj and over there. And one's even set in Italy, in the part of the Lebanese diaspora there. So it's like, it was about the setting and the stories they had to tell, and how they explored family in their stories was what I was interested in. Yeah.
Do you remember any, I feel like you had submissions that
Oh,
were
yeah.
like special because you wrote about them.
Yeah, there were a few submissions that I really wanted to put in as part of the shortlist. One was a story about a Palestinian who grew up in Kuwait, and as part of his extended family, there were two women in the family that they just both happened to dress as men. But no one said anything, no one really addressed it, everyone just accepted it was a normal thing. But because he was so young when it happened, that he only started reflecting on it as he got older. And this was back in the 70s or 60s in Kuwait. So now we're just thinking like, were they trans? Were they dressing up to try and blend in? Because they, a lot of questions. So I thought from a writer about how she became friends connections online with the whole community from the Gulf region. And I really wanted that in, but just couldn't really find the place to fit it in. I mean, there's also like some really funny ones, like about a guy who lived in Amman, moved to London, and how it was like reading something like a really positive story from had teenage Sex in the City. Would have been great, but I did email you couldn't make it in, but please submitting your work elsewhere.
I really liked the where the two women dressed up and were sort of, it was like normal. I've observed it in Gaza where it's like this prat and no one is, like that isn't the story that is surrounding their identity in like a proud way, but it's like they're clearly this man who's just really feminine and everyone knows it, and not everybody, maybe there are, really is woven in many ways when consumers and capitalists here, so we like name things really, and this culture of that's like about it as like always an image.
Yeah. There was some other chapter. There was one chapter I remember about a guy who went to visit Cairo, who was working in Cairo, and he himself I think he was a Tunisian background or something. And his chapter basically starts off about how he got arrested by the cops and went. I don't remember, it's been a while since I read it, but he had an interaction with the police, and rather than make it a chapter about how the police in Cairo made him scared to be queer or anything, he turned the chapter into a love letter to Cairo and to the queer community in Cairo. And I thought that was really special because it really challenges this idea of wherever you find home, you're going to find the community regardless of what the oppression, the systemic discrimination is in place. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's always surprising just how inspiring people really are under
Yeah,
fire, especially. Was there anything in the anthology, or maybe outside of it, that was like just plainly unexpected, surprising, like you were like, what? I didn't expect this.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't happen during the editing process. It happened after the book was published. One of the chapters from Nahid Toubia, she's a Sudanese writer. Her chapter is about when she goes to Sudan to find her daughter, to adopt her during the era of the Bashir dictatorship. It's an amazing chapter. But I found out she came to the London book launch in September, and she was on the panel with us and stuff, and she made this, like, I was blown away, but she was like, oh yeah, me publishing this chapter is my coming out. And we were like, whoa, okay. So this is amazing, yeah. I was really amazed that she had the courage to do that. And then I found out after that she's worked with all these massive big international firms like the IMF and stuff. She's met some US presidents. I'm like, who is this person? But I didn't care about her history. I cared more about the story she has to tell. But it's just really surprising how you learn more after this being published. So
You like see them for who they are. Large, like you like. You find, in general, you've talked important for us to talk about because, I'm a journalist and like rubble footage and death. There was a story the other week about queer place, and it was really hard on them, and it was real. I focused on this queer organization called Mosaic, the queer people in Beirut. They literally turned over an apartment into shelters. I did like a video package on it, and I was like, the problem is no one's like focusing on like not trauma. Like, yes, there's a lot of trauma, but there's also community and badassery like everywhere. Like, do a story on Mosaic, this queer shelter that everyone's general, like especially in this book, I guess, like in this.
For me, trauma porn, I see it as something where you decide on what the stories should be told, what stories should be published. I specifically do that to make readers feel warm and fuzzy that they're, our lives are so much safer here. Genuine change, it doesn't really do anything tangible. So the people who do, you know, it's absolutely nothing against gatekeepers I have an issue with, and the way they only care about certain narratives, as you said, you know. So like, why not do stuff about the people on the front line? Because queer people are always on the front line.
They're always there.
Yeah, yeah. And not just in Lebanon, but even when the Iraqi revolution was happening, they were all on the front line there. As you saw when you went to Gaza, they're part of the community, so embedded and woven in the community. But seeing us as like the passive victim of a barbaric culture, and they want to keep perpetuating that. But you know, I just didn't like the way that just strips us of agency. I'd rather have stories where we can tell them on our own terms without people saying, oh, maybe tone that down, maybe focus on that more, you know, like the next white rider next to us, you know?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. It's like, it's not the full truth, sorry. Like, you know what I mean? That's just not the full truth. Like, I interviewed some trans women in Beirut who were displaced, and you're just like, oh, you're also about it. Like, you're very much struggling, but you're also a very, like, driven 20-something-year-old who, like, has their own business that no one's like, that's like not, might not be like a bustling business, but it's something, like, you're a full person, and the thing that's sad is that it's being stolen from you, and then, you know what I mean? Like, that's the sad part. The sad part isn't that you're just a sad person, it's like, you weren't a sad person literally a week ago.
So I think it's just having the ability to think critically about why these stories are told in that certain framing, I guess, is well, I guess where I would draw the line is when people don't think critically about that. So, yeah.
Was there a piece that you remember feeling really like like you related to it, like it felt close to home for your personal?
In this one?
Yes.
Yes. The middle chapter from Alizah Ghazal, she's the co-founder of Club Ara in Sydney. That was personal for me because I used to go to Club Ara all the time. Club Ara is basically a queer Arabic dance music party in Sydney. It's been going on since 2002, I think. I'm pretty sure it's the longest running queer Arabic music party in the diaspora. And it's still being run by the same two co-founders that founded it back then. I started going when it was in mid 2010s, and that party, I had just come back from the Middle East. I had just been to Lebanon, went to Bardo for the first time. I was blown away by how Bardo, this amazing, cute little neighborhood bar, just like could be Arab, Lebanese, and queer at the same time. And then shortly after, went back to Sydney after that trip. I discovered Club Ara, and it was the closest thing I could get to what I experienced at Bardo, but more. Because it meant there was it was just this safe space where the community came and we could celebrate our culture, we could be ourselves without this metaphoric, like looking over our shoulder to see who's watching us, or even like going to like wedding parties, receptions, and being on the dance floor and feeling like that all the judgmental aunties are watching you and they're going to spread gossip and stuff. Without any of that, it's just so liberating.
Without any of it?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's gonna be gossiping.
Got it.
There's different better kinds of gossip. Yeah, but yeah, like this party is where I discovered myself, where I found myself, and where I was, I guess, it helped me overcome this constant compartmentalization of my Arab and queer identity. Going to Club Ara allowed me to be both and sort of seeped into my everyday life, and now I can't imagine separating the two. They are part of who I am, so yeah.
Yeah, I really want to go to that party, to be honest, now that I heard about it. Club Ara is just a fucking good name.
I know, yeah. The play on words is so good. It can mean like sweat things, or it can mean Ara, the drink.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, it's such a good name.
For me, I feel like in this anthology, Abu Layla is my mother's pronoun, is one of my favorites. I just feel like something about the way Abu Layla communicates. It's like very raw, it's like very forward. It placed me like right into Beirut in a way that like I've known before, which is like, you know, like I've covered drag queens in Beirut who are like all sharing a house, all sorts of different kinds of queer communities. And I felt like the mother, auntie, sister, I think that theme is really interesting and important, and I wonder how you felt it comes alive in this story, and then also other stories, or just in general, like mothers and aunties and how they kind of express safety or express acceptance in a way that's kind of surprising. It's not exactly like usual.
For me personally, I think the beauty of that chapter is how there's no men at all.
Yes.
It just like it's just centers around women and celebrates Arab women, celebrates Arab femininity, and I think that was what the beauty of it. And because we've many of us have been in a household where the matriarch is what kind of makes it feel like a home, and yeah, I guess it and the way Abu Layla sort of just talked about the arch of the story arc about her mum coming around, their mum, sorry, coming around to accepting them towards the end. It was just like very typical. I guess that's what happened with my mum as well. Like she never really came to accept it up front so blatantly, but I see the way she accepted it was the way she was started asking about my husband. Asking about what I'm feeding him, and whenever my husband came to visit Sydney, she was fussing over him, and it was all small things like that. So
I've found that theme to be really important actually for a lot of us, not necessarily because we all have amazing moms and amazing aunties, but because I think the power of the feminine in general is just beautiful in the Arab culture. It is the driving force. I also think the theme of sisters in general in the Arab world, like I met a woman, a trans woman in Gaza, one of my sources I would meet up with often just to, check in on and try to advocate for. And she told me once, her sisters before the genocide were really accepting of her. She would get dressed up with them secretly in their dresses and their clothes, and she just always felt accepted by them. And it was just so touching because I also felt really accepted by my sisters, right? Like, they were like aunties to me growing up, but I do feel like it's just such an interesting hue of Arab culture that like sisters and aunties, they're just like, it's almost like it's your fault anyways, I'm gay. Like, your fault queer. Thinking of like non-binaries because it was this non-binary created a trust. There was just so many like, one thing I always focus on is like the practicality, the point, how are we helping the people we're sharing? It's just so resonant for me. How do you feel like creative resistance? Obviously, this is all what we're gathering or building resistance together, but in this moment, how is it to be going on this tour right now, talking about all of this in the background feels so heavy, and how has it come up?
It's come up a lot, and about it, right? I remember when I had the Canadian book launch in Toronto, it happened the day after Beirut. So that was really heavy, especially with the Canadian book launch event. It had a lot of it was drag queens and speakers in Toronto, so it was very heavy for the community. But still 90 people, but really moving at the same time, giving that still find space for joy. Because I think those two things can happen concurrently, and also rage. Like having rage, grief, and joy all is really important because we're able to hold the powers accountable. With grief, like we all deserve to grieve. Like with all the powers that be. So just being in spaces like this, having events like this is fuck you. We're gonna be happy and be and if it makes them angry, so be it. Their tears of anger are what keep me on in the community looking young. Like honestly, like this is why I still have a full head of hair at 40 years old. From all the homophobes, desires who just hate me for hate our community for celebrating being ourselves. Because they just get scared that we can do these things, that we do have the agency to come together as a community. So I think just having these events with everything happening in the background, it was hard, but I think it was also really powerful that we can come together and sort of have some just like moments of healing through those communities. So
Yeah, I think one of the things you mentioned is like hafla.
Yes.
The hafla, which means party. It also means, in some contexts, to care for one another. Just to get more specific about the stories and the writers in this, are there any ones that come to mind when you think of that? Enjoying, coming together, caring, how a party is actually caring for each other. Does that make sense? Like, I don't know if there is going to be like a one feeling. Maybe it's just one of the stories. It was a party that, maybe Klabara?
Yeah, there's that. I think the final chapter from Lamia Bugan, it's like a letter to their daughter or stepdaughter. But in this letter, she's reflecting on her Moroccan identity and also wanted to create this queer, we can all be family, we can all celebrate being. It was like a manifesto, and I just thought that was the perfect way to end the book. I think that manifest really captures this whole idea of caring for each other, being together, showing up for each other, but yeah, I mean, I don't know if I answered your question.
No, I mean, it's just really a feeling of, I just think that we in the West don't really realize how much part on in actually the Middle East, and I don't mean just I just mean actually coming together and like, there are underground parties in Ramallah and like in Beirut, there's like such a robust queer scene, like I know a woman who like runs the entire like nightlife. Like I feel like a percentage of figures it out. Do you know what I mean? Like figures it out.
Yeah, I know someone. But he couldn't commit. He's from Oman. He's living as a refugee in Europe at the moment. Before he became a refugee, he was starting up these parties in Muscat, and it was all about inviting them and just keeping it in the family. You know, these safe spaces usually like just kept in the basement.
Right.
It was like pretty open air, but like it was like. It's who you know, and coming together, the community, it was just usually clear. And I thought it was fascinating because people see authorities in the Gulf countries, they always push this idea of the queer community. They find ways to, seek each other out. So
it just doesn't say queer on the flyer, literally. Like that's that's it. I was like, I think that, you know, you were talking about coming out and how coming out in general is to see what you had to say about where you're coming from when you say like, yeah, we can't come out that easily. Like it's not that.
You want people to misconstrue that more about coming out when you feel you're ready to, if you, and if you're not ready to, expectation in Western cultures where if you're queer, and until you come out, you're not really validated. Cultures not so much so, like, you know, your identities are important, yeah, but we can still be into a wider Arab society, whether we come and, so, I don't know, I just feel like the way I said that was more about responding to this implicit expectation in Western culture where coming out is like the rite of passage march or whatever. But like, we don't all have to do that. And some people don't, like, I'm too tired to march, like, I'm asleep. And that's why that doesn't make me any less of a queer person, right? So I just don't want people to think that it's the only way to validate your existence by coming out. Simply new concept, I guess, called really trust, and you sort of let them in your inner circle.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So you're really coming out, because you're probably never gonna be public about it. Yeah. And if you do, it might be a long time before that happens. But who you trust and love, and they see you for who you are, it's not really such a big.
I've spoken to so many people who are kind of like, you know, Arabs that are queer in the Middle East who are sort of so fatigued by the idea in a way that is like separate or decoupled from just everything else. Yeah. Because you just hear them say like, I'm also Palestinian, I'm also Lebanese, there's just so many variables, and also my queerness is infused in all of those identities. And so it's very interesting to hear their humoristic, like you can sell everything all the time and be like, I'm a queer person and I wear rainbow and damn, I'm being read to filth, like just the scholastic, they've done the reading. They're not queer people in the Middle East. Yes, of course there are people with different levels of privilege, but the ones that have equivalent levels of privilege is well read in, and they're very resistant to the ways we've done it wrong. Inspired to think in new and creative ways that oppresses my sense of other. How does this book get in between chosen family? Where did that show up to you in this?
It shows up in the sense that our cultures is fairly alien, because for many of us drummed into our psyche from a young age that our started that chosen family just seems weird. Like, you know, why would you have chosen family but your own family, you know? Yeah. So where there's this, you know, where our individual needs are subsumed for the needs of the family, and how, you know, how we perform or how we act and what we achieve in the public sphere reflects on the family and stuff. It all goes back to the family. So that's why I thought this concept of chosen family might seem alien, but I still don't think, you know, it doesn't mean we can't have chosen family. Right? Yeah. Because we do. Well, even like, it might not be chosen family in the sense that, you know, we live together all the time, whatever, but even if it's a close circle of friends, that in some ways is a close chosen family. But yeah, just that was where that was coming from, I guess. Yeah.
I mean, also, I feel as though Arabs who aren't queer have such large families. We have such large families that actually you find that like you have so many cousins or or people have so many cousins that there's an entire family within the family.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like there's a whole other like there's like divisions and fragmentations, and then it's also like that guy's uncle's cousin's friend actually feels like family too, so he's included. But like that sister's mom's wife, like we hate her. She's not included. She's like not allowed. You know what I mean? Like there's like weird.
But even when you meet
lines.
other Arabs, especially when I meet other queer Arabs, one of the first things we do in the introducing ourselves is finding out where our families are from in the Middle East and finding out where our grandparents are from and whether our grandparents might know each other and then whether our cousins might know each other and stuff. It's this whole mapping out. And in that way, it's just like, okay, where do you fit in the family, you know?
Oh my god! And it's as a diaspora person,
Yeah.
as a diasporic, I was overwhelmed as hell because I was like, how do you know all of this? Like, how do you know? Someone would ask me a question of like, oh, do you know like Tufit and Suli? And I'm like, I don't know what that is. And then I'll ask my dad, he's like, yes! Like, and then they'll know the whole way that I was born. You know what I mean? And I'm like, I don't. This is crazy. Like, I feel exposed. What do you want a non-Arab reader to like take away from this?
Yeah, I guess I want them to sort of just at least, as a bare minimum, just realize that we're a community that's messy, that's nuanced, that's, you know, we have our own stories. We're not all just here to feed into this trauma porn narrative or this passive victim narrative. We're so much more than that. And I want people to understand, I guess, that, you know, this is just a start, I guess. If it's gonna start a conversation, then, you know, my job's done. Yeah, I just don't want people to think that this is the ultimate representation of queer Arabs and that's it. There's so many more stories out there, more books, and especially with the homosexual intifada coming out, and there's other anthologies that have come out in the past couple of years. I know the Queer Arab Glossaries that you probably know, and the El Ghuruba, another anthology from Canada of queer Arab writers. So I'm really excited to see all these stories and published works come out, and I hope that just keeps growing because there's a lot of room on the table for everyone. And I guess more than anything, I want mainstream media to have a real hard think about what kind of stories they publish and why they only seem to go after certain kind of narrative rather than, you know, why can't we also talk about sex in mainstream media? Like, you know, like stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's often like we're just like reduced to how much they can fantasize about or something.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, like it's like they, and I don't know who they is, but it's just this like, you know, ominous and villainous they, can only see in like 3 colors, right? So like I have to fit in one of those 3 colors, and even though I'm like many colors. And it's so annoying because obviously I think the reason all of this destruction is happening is ultimately because of racism and dehumanization. So it's like these you know, ultimately it's like feels so reduced to say reductive, but it's like literally it's just racism.
Yeah,
Like it's genuinely like it comes down to it.
Yeah,
So these kinds of things are important.
Yeah, and I think also it just feeds into this, or what I hope is for readers to pick this up and not otherize us as much as they may have before. Because we are otherized as a culture. We're seen as the other, this like demonic, barbaric culture in a different world. And that's why the destruction of our homelands just seems so normalized, right? And I hope when in reading these stories, it's a small percentage in helping take away that otherization and make people realize that we're actually closer to home than you think, you know? Yeah.
Was there any story that really opened a world for you? You want to like just find out more about?
In this book?
Yeah.
All of them?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many in there that I think could easily be turned into a novel or to memoir and stuff. But there is one chapter in there where it's about it's a couple, a married couple, they're talking about their adoption journey. Yeah. And they ended their chapter because their adoption journey hadn't finished yet. So it was almost like, you know, a TBC. So I would love to see them do a follow-up and see how it all went for them and stuff. But yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that actually. I was like thinking about my own answer, and actually that's such a good one. My last question actually is, and you've touched on it along the way because it just is so much of, it's a piece that is resistant in many ways. How is this resistance like to you? Like what is this resisting against?
I think it's just archiving all these stories more than anything. Having these in recorded on paper and stored away in national libraries in the UK and Australia, and I think in the US as well. And that can never be taken away. It just recorded is permanent, right? And that is resisting these narratives in Arab cultures that we don't exist, where we've got proof that we do exist.
Right.
And it's also resisting narrative in Western cultures that we somehow have to separate these identities. They feed us this idea that our identities are always in conflict with each other, but these books prove that they're not in conflict with each other. They can be be in harmony and amazingly go well together, because some Arab cultures, but let's be real, all Arab cultures are so fucking gay, right? So gay. Like, I don't know why we try to sort of hide that and be all macho. Just look at our ancient history, right? The ancient Egyptians, the Phoenicians, the Nabateans, the Persians, even the Caliphates, they were all so gay. Like, come on. Just been straight washed over time. And I guess I want to remind people, bring it all back in, saying, like, we've been part of this culture for years, centuries, millennia, and I hope this book, archiving these books, is a way to sort of permanently solidify that we're not going anywhere.
Yeah, we've talked about how the poet from, and I think it was the 1200s, I can't remember who it was. There's queerness that's been a part of, and transness, and all sorts of parts of our community that have been like really like flashpoint like evidence here and there. It's like, oh well, that just means that it was there. Yeah. There's so much history that I think actually what's interesting to me is, when I am doing reporting, and I'm reporting sometimes with really hard masculine resistance fighter men, you're just like, there's an entire subculture here of gayness, and they're just not saying it out loud, but someone's fucking here, and I don't know who it is. And then, you pull back a little bit of the curtain and you talk more, and you find out, actually, no, like literally, in fact, there is a lot of queerness everywhere, and it's often, when it's shamed and it's hidden, it can be dangerous. But a lot of times in the Middle East, it's just hidden. Like, it's like not necessarily even shamed. It's just like, yeah. Of course that happens. It's like sex. Like, it's just not out loud. Don't tell anyone. But they're also saying that about straight sex. So it's like, I really appreciated this conversation so much. I guess I should open it up to the floor for questions if anybody wants. But yeah, thank you. Any questions that anybody has, comments? Things that we can clarify? Yes.
I guess it's circling back to Aki's point on our question about the Hefna point. It's not so much of a question, it's just a point that I wanted to add. I'm currently writing a piece about music and how we kind of relate to those sounds, and what is it genetic, is it something imprinted? And I always refer to this notion that we specifically have in the Arab world, and there's also this powerful queer community support group here called Tarab. And I feel like that is kind of like that notion that is so precious, and that I don't know if you have some sort of relation to that, because in the concerts of old age and now, this notion is kind of electrifying in a way, and it brings out so much emotion, and I don't even have the proper word to describe it. It's just something there.
I totally agree. Tarab is something that I've sort of grown to appreciate as I get older. I don't know if that's just me turning into my father, because he was obsessed with all the Tarab performance, especially Kulthum.
Yes.
And my mum is even though she's not Tarab, but my mum loves Fairuz and Sabah and stuff. But I do have an experience where I think before I lost my hearing, I used to love listening to Kulthum songs that go on for 5 years. And while I'm working, it was a great way to keep myself focused and get in the zone. And even long drives, it was great background music. And just recognizing the opening tunes of the string arrangement, you just know I just get goosebumps hearing the tunes in my head. But there was one moment where I was sobbing, enjoy though, when basically not long after I had my cochlear implant switched on, It took a while for me to sort of start hearing things clearly. It's a whole process because it's basically my brain just retraining itself to understand these electronic signals that are being converted from sound. But before the operation, they told me there's no guarantee you'll be able to enjoy music again like you did before. The only way to know was to try, and I just kept on trying for a while. It sounded really distorted, robotic, and then and I avoided listening to Inkatun for like at least 2 months because I was like too hesitant. I didn't want to be disappointed. And then when I finally started understanding, hearing some music and it was all clear again, I was listening to music religiously to sort of, I was determined to get back into it. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna give it a go. And then I remember putting on Insomnia and I was like sobbing. I'm like, I can actually hear it, and it's just like, and hearing the background crowd, I felt like I was there. So it was just, that was special for me.
Yeah. Thank you so much for saying that. That's so beautiful. Yeah, I mean, I don't have nearly the experience that you're explaining, but I do think something about Tada, just generally, like, just moving to these kinds of beats, like, it is queerness in sort of a essential way, I think, because it sort of makes you stop caring about anything but your body moving, and something about that is very revolutionary because it's just like, it's like a resistance of like whatever else is going on. You're just like, I don't care. I don't know. Someone in I think it's probably it's some handle that is a queer Palestinian handle that was just like, queerness is like a revolution from the bottom up. Like it's like meant to like shake things around. It's not always sexual. It just is about shaking things up actually from the bottom to the top and kind of just challenging the power structures that don't care for everybody, and I think something like the way that anyone's body moves during this kind of music is like, I don't know, the essential like building block of that, like it's like the cell that like becomes the thing, but yeah.
But one of my cousins makes this joke a few years ago, and it stuck with me because it's so true. Like, Arabs in general are really bad at sport on the international. Apart from maybe soccer, we're really bad at sport. You don't really see us winning all these gold medals, right? But music, we're phenomenal at. It's what unites us all. And so many moments in history where music just puts aside our sectarianism and brings us together. Like Beirut, for example, did this unforgettable concert on the ruins of Beirut in central Beirut shortly after the civil war ended. She brought everyone from Lebanon together, and you can watch that concert on YouTube. It's like amazing the power of unity that music does and how it brings everyone together. And I think it is revolutionary, and all these even though it's now become very corporate and consumerist and stuff, there's still a lot of artists out there that use music as a way to sort of put forward political commentary.
Yeah, I agree. That was such a iconic and important thing to do, actually. We really need that now.
Yeah,
We really need that.
yeah.
Anybody have any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question about the submission process. So I'm a Khadija queer Arab, and I'm just curious to hear kind of how the submissions differed based on regions. Because when you say Arab, right, that's like a very wide net that you're casting. You're casting the Khadiji, the Sham, the North African. Like there's a lot of, complexities within that.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious to hear like kind of the thematic elements of those submissions, right?
Yeah.
Because as a queer Khadiji who lived in the Khadij for a little bit, a lot of my experiences meeting other queers was like you said, the coffee bar kind of situation, or like the underground party without the name on the flyer, things of that nature. So I kind of want to hear about those submissions.
Yeah, I think the first thing I'm pretty sure part of the submissions guidelines is the writers had to self-identify as Arab. It was all up to them whether they wanted to submit or not. Because I am very conscious in many, how would they?
Stories coming from. Do you know what I mean? Like where were they pulling the inspiration? Yeah, where were they?
Oh, okay, okay. Seeking connections with others. The submissions that focused around the Asia region, and with community members were predominantly from the Khalij region, were going back and discovering themselves as Arabs and not wanting to leave. The reverse diaspora experience and how they navigated that with their family. Some of them ended happily, some of them, ended up, mum and dad anymore, But even the way they described these stories, and use like the tip of the iceberg, I don't want you to really complex. yeah, mine's a bit mush at the moment with the country. There'll be some other things, but we'll become speak to that later. So yeah.
I wanted to talk about our personal coming in, our focus and, you know, identity and how we were looking at Middle Eastern cultures. As an African American, especially living in New York City, one of the things I've observed is how Middle Eastern cultures that are integrated within our daily life. And one thing I know is that just when I go into what we call a bodega, which can often be Dominican owned, but often it's run by someone who's Yemeni, Mauritanian, Lebanese, and they automatically understand me. They understand my identity, and the racial identity is obviously their thing. They also understand the queer identity, and they sort of bring me in, and there is, I feel that immediate warmth, and I feel that family, and I feel that connect. There's no need for me to identify myself because they seem to intrinsically and intuitively understand. So maybe that's a Middle Eastern thing that if I lived in one of the countries, I would hear you speak about it. I say to myself, so I have made it one of my goals, learn Arabic, interestingly. So I've been asking, well, where can I get the purest form of Arabic? And the level of generosity.
Good question.
The level of generosity and willingness to bring me in, I have to say that the queerness is almost a non-factor. You know, the racial identity is basically non-existent. And so it's just a matter of, you want to learn our culture and you are part of our culture. So I just wanted to share that I related with you.
Is just, I think that there's like systems that exist that, like in America, you're in the American, ultimately it's kind of a manufacture we all have.
Yeah, it is.
Right? So not rare, but it's really, really beautiful to figure out how to like undo all of these, the things that make us really, the labels that, and not really necessarily queer labels, but just what everything is, because I think with culture, when you like remove yourself out of that thing, which we know, but that.
And I say, oh, I'm at home, and don't even know the names,
Yeah.
you know?
'Cause-
whatever little Arabic I know.
Yeah, because I think it's also just like majoritarian culture, right?